you. Well, thanks for sparing me having to self-promote by doing it, and describe and kind of explaining the benefits of having a narrow area of research, which are that you can be doing more in it. So, what I'm going to be talking about today is the topic of race and embodiment in online social spaces, specifically massively multiplayer online role-playing games, which is a handful. It's a long acronym. Has anybody ever played a massively multiplayer online role-playing game? Okay, which ones have people played? I just want you to shout out what you have played so we can get some comparison here. Halo, World of Warcraft. Any other ones? Call of Duty, okay. Did that start out as an MMO, or was it initially a standalone and then became networked?
No, I've only played like Call of Duty 4 and Call of Duty 3, so I can't tell you about the earlier ones. But it started like Halo.
Okay, yeah. So Halo, and I think that one started out as standalone games, console-based games, and as consoles become networked more and more, you're seeing them become social spaces, whereas before they were really spaces for digital play for an individual. So I think this trend is continuing. The one I'm going to be talking about, World of Warcraft, surpassed the 10 million player mark earlier this year, which is really a kind of breakthrough moment, because this is a truly multinational group of players focused mainly in Asia, Europe, and the US. That is a huge, huge number of people, all of them paying subscription fees. So this is an important industry, obviously. Blizzard, the company that makes World of Warcraft, is making huge amounts of money off of players. Something that has not been talked about so much, however, is the issue of racial and to some extent as well gender identity in this game. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. It's got nothing to do with this book that I wrote. It's totally a new project. And the reason I'm interested in digital games is that in some ways digital games resemble what the internet looked like 10 years ago. World of Warcraft in particular. Mostly male, relatively young, though I'd say there are many players in their 30s as well in World of Warcraft, and still an area that's somewhat underexamined, I would say, as being not yet media in the scholarly sense of the word, nor yet exactly communication. It seems to occupy some middle ground. So my object is to encourage people to do work in this area, because the notion that digital games are in some sense democratic because they value skill, experience, or other more personal factors really goes a long way to obscure the fact there is all kinds of racism both in the game and around the game. So instead of doing a textual reading of what happens in the game, or an ethnographic reading, I'm going to be talking about what happens around the game, which is to say the economies, global economies that surround second-party reselling of virtual property. And that sounds complicated, but I'm going to show you a video that I think will be helpful. But first I'm going to set up a little bit some of the contours of what digital games come to signify in terms of some types of racialization. So if you've seen this before, you might recognize it. Okay?
You like the movie Made in Manhattan?
You know I know you're gay?
How?
I saw you make a spinach dip in a loaf of sourdough bread once.
You know how I know that you're gay? You have a rainbow bumper sticker on your car that says, "I love it when balls are in my face."
That's gay?
God damn it.
I'm ripping your head off right now. It's off, and now I'm throwing it at your face. Fuck you! Oh.
You guys, she's picking me up in an hour.
Oh,
Drag, dude.
wait, she's speaking up from here?
Yeah.
That's fucked up, man.
Why?
Why? Seriously. Look at this place, man. You gotta see this through the eyes of a woman, you know? What is she gonna think when she comes in here? Oh, look, he's got a billion toys. And more video games than a teenaged Asian kid.
Okay. So obviously when you watch this clip, you can see that digital games help to create a space both within the game and surrounding the game, the social space, that's very associated with masculinity, a particular kind of homosocial behavior, which in this banter is about, do you know how I know you're gay, right? Obviously about relations between men. a world that's closed to women, pretty much, and a kind of juvenile world. But something I also notice is that it's also a white world. The players are white, but their avatars in this game, which is supposed to look, I think, or be maybe, in fact, Mortal Kombat, are not. So it seems that having too many games makes you like a teenage Asian kid, but playing games just means you're a man. And so interesting racialization of games as an activity, not just identity within the game. You know, are you a man? Are you white? But this idea as well of gender and masculinity articulating to nationality. This is very much a kind of middle-class American milieu, class, middle class, and other aspects of identity. So something I'm looking at here is how are the visual cultures around games and within games and the economies supported by games, in other words, game producers, but also game consumers, game buyers, and game industries formed by these cultural differences, right? So something I'm looking at in particular in this paper is the issue of game economies. And I want to look at game economy in two ways. You have what I call the external or exegetic economy of games. Who buys games? Who are they made for? Who and where are they produced? Digital games have really, really long-standing roots in Asia, which makes them unlike other parts of digital media, such as the internet itself, which is not, did not spring out of an Asian industrial or military base. It's a multinational group of users, but the internal economies of games are important and interesting as well, particularly as people begin to spend more money in games and on games. Something like World of Warcraft has an ongoing financial commitment for the user. It's like cable. You don't just buy it once. Instead, you are a subscriber. And so the model of cable and the model of subscription is very interesting. It has more to do, in a sense, with the membership notion of identity than it does with an ownership notion of identity. So what I'm looking at in particular is internal economies in digital games. How are resources bought and sold within games, particularly social games? It's been said that games are about managing resources. Has anybody played Civilization or StarCraft? Right, real-time strategy games? Oh, everybody's played those. And so they kind of make you think in this kind of strategic way about how to manage resources. How to manage scarcity, where to put your defenses, where to focus your resources that you have. It's always thinking in those terms. World of Warcraft literally has money as part of its economy. And so I'm going to be talking about where that money comes from, how it circulates, and how race articulates to this. Okay, so let me move on.
Okay, I'm back. Dude, we've been waiting forever. Well, I'm sorry I had to take a dump. If you didn't eat so much, you wouldn't have diarrhea all the time, fat ass. Hey, I don't need to take any lip from a frickin' girl. Come on, we have to finish the quest in Stonehaven.
Stan!
Hang on, guys, my dad wants something. What?
You've been on your computer all weekend. Shouldn't you go out and socialize with your friends?
I am socializing, Artard. I'm logged on to an MMORPG with people from all over the world and getting XP with my party using TeamSpeak. So where to now? See where I am? It's this way. Yeah, come on, let's go. I am the mightiest dwarf in all of Azeroth. Wow, look at all these people playing right now. Yeah, it's bullcrap. I'll bet half of these people are Koreans. Oh, crap! It's that guy again!
Okay, so one of the things that makes this clip funny, I think, is the way that this child has managed to turn around the anti-gaming discourse and kind of direct it against his dad. Early games were often criticized as being violent, but mainly antisocial. They isolated people from each other, which has also been said of the internet and many other media forms generally. Here he's talking about the internet and this gaming space in particular as a social space where he's with his friends, not just strangers like predators or pedophiles or any of those kinds of things. Of course, the part I wanted you to notice most of all is at the end when they're talking about all these people, right? And you know, these avatars don't look anything like the characters in South Park. It's part of the humor in it, is that I don't have to take any lip from a freaking girl. There are no freaking girls in South Park, as far as I can tell. There's some freaking women, but really not any freaking girls. So the idea of identity play, really visibly here, I think, kind of draws attention to the fact that it's not a utopia. You know, being a girl is still a problem, even in World of Warcraft. But at the end, where they're commenting on the number of people, presumably a good thing, and he says, I bet half these people are Koreans. Which is to say, Asians in-game, in the economy of the game, are viewed as overly invested in it as users, as in the first clip, right? Asian teenagers, they use too much. And here, they're viewed as social bodies that are undesirable or unassimilable. In fact, they're not really social bodies. They're just bodies. And I'm going to talk about part of the history of that. When is a body not a social body? If you played World of Warcraft, you know there's a terminology for characters in-game who aren't real. They're not real people, meaning that they're automated, right? They're just like robots in the game. They're called NPCs, which are non-player characters, and this paradigm obtains across all game platforms. Here, Koreans are described as non-player characters, even though they are in the game. They're not assimilated, as I said, to the culture of the game. So the notion of a global village through electronic mediation, really not a global village at all, but a social environment that is divided quite definitively by race, language, and nation. Language you can understand because there are obviously differences in language, but that's not what's commented upon here. It seems to have to do as much with nation as with anything else. So if game players are racialized as white and male in the context of US game consumption, perverse and obsessive forms of gameplay are racialized as Asian and male and overwhelmingly young. And news stories about Chinese or Korean children or men dying in game parlors really work to underscore, I think, this characterization. Korean players in particular, and Chinese players as well, are racialized partly because of the rise in in-game economies in which players from China and Korea go into the game, do repetitive, boring, menial tasks to earn virtual money and then sell that money on IGE or eBay. So this clip will give you a little more background on this question. Okay, so.
Hundreds of thousands of British computer gamers have joined what's fast becoming an international phenomenon, a virtual community of more than 8 million people all playing a single computer game. But now gamers are paying real money to gain extra powers in the virtual world. And the gaming community is split over whether that's cheating. Richard Scott went into the world of Warcraft to find out more.
This is a world that most people never see. But more than 8 million people around the globe come here on a regular basis, paying tens of millions of pounds a month for the privilege. Now, each of these characters that you can see here is being controlled by real people from different countries all around the world. And they're all cooperating or fighting with each other in order to get ahead. And it's that competition which is causing controversy. In order to be successful at a game, you need better equipment for your character. But to buy this equipment, you need in-game money. Now, you can earn this money yourself by doing jobs like mining. It's not difficult, but it can take a very long time. So a whole industry has sprung up which will sell you game money for real cash, money which might take you 100 hours to collect, can be bought on websites like this one for £20. And if you give them a couple of £100, they'll even create a top-level character for you. And this is where much of that takes place, China. It may look like an ordinary office, but these people are paid to play full-time. The in-game money they earn is then sold to Western players.
World of Warcraft is very hot now. In the gold farming studio, some of us play for 12 hours a day. Many players want to improve their characters themselves, but they don't have the time. They need to go to work in the day, so they need someone else to play for them.
The game money earned by players like Chin Shun often ends up being bought by people like Ryan here in the UK. He works full-time, so can't earn enough in-game money to compete, so he's bought it instead.
I have a life outside of the game that certainly is a lot more important. So the few precious hours I do get to play on my game, I don't want to spend doing the same thing over and over again to get in-game money when I could just buy that and do the stuff in-game that I actually enjoy.
But is this actually cheating? Many in the gaming community, including the game's creators, think it is.
It's like in the real world. In the real world, there are people that try to cheat, and last month alone, we banned 100,000 accounts for illegal gold trading or cheating in the game, and it's very important for us to keep a fair gaming environment.
But there's no sign any of this is putting off gamers. Thousands turned up at midnight in London earlier this year when new features of the game were launched. For gamers who work, it'll always be easier to buy their way into another world than to find time for two lives. Richard Scott, BBC News, in the world of Warcraft.
This is BBC World News. I'm David in London.
I'm Catty in Washington.
So BBC's been covering this a little bit. They have some print articles as well around this question. What's interesting is when you watch the clip, they say, for players who work, buying this gold is a way to get ahead. As if to say the players who are playing at 12 hours at a time and selling the virtual property they earn to the leisure players in the UK are not working. So this is a good example of how gameplay like this, which is monetized, right, which has a monetary system within it, is encouraging an exegetic monetary system, which is really creating a very racialized labor market here, so that players who work are really players who play, right? They're players who want to do the fun part of the game. If you play World of Warcraft, you know a lot of it is pretty boring. Skinning animals and making stuff, that's what my player does a lot of times, and it takes a long time to earn enough money in that to buy something really good. So players who work are players who play. But players who play for money are not viewed as people, I think, as you can see in the World of Warcraft, in the South Park clip. They're Koreans. They're not real players. You can't interact with them. They're not part of social life. Also, this clip talks about how in World of Warcraft, players are all cooperating or fighting with each other to get ahead, stressing very much the competitive aspect of this kind of online environment as contrasted with something like Second Life, which really doesn't have that same, kind of struggle for limited resources. Also, the interview with the man who says, I have a life outside the game, as if to say the players in China don't have lives outside the game. So the notion of competition and fairness is really what informs this protest, I think, that players have against gold farmers, the way that they have an opportunity to have what you call an intercultural connection with players. Because World of Warcraft is a global environment, right? They could have interesting intercultural moments. I see Melissa smiling and she knows what I'm going to say. But instead, those moments are entirely inflected by race, gender, and nation. And as I said, somewhat by language, but very much so by this economy, differences in this exegetical and diegetical economy. So it's not culture alone, I think, that is causing this conflict. It's the way that there are different global economies here of work and of play. Some people are players who don't have to work in the game because somebody else does their work for him. I can update this clip a little bit. Recently, an Epic Gear level 70 rogue, I don't know if you play, but if you do, then you know what I'm talking about, right? One of the best equipped, most leveled up characters. I'd say maybe 3 months of continuous gameplay by an expert was sold for 7,000 euros on eBay. So that's a record as far as I know. Somebody told me hiring someone to level up a character or buying a character from someone who's leveled it up is kind of like hiring a personal trainer. They do the work to get your avatar or your toon really buffed out, and you pay them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the consequences of this market in virtual play, and particularly in virtual avatars and some of the investments that are not realized. Right? When my brother-in-law went up to level 70, I was so excited for him. I wanted to give him a party, because I'm a player as well. I'm not up there yet. My sister was like, "You're high. What's wrong with you? Like, why is that even a big deal?" That's a lot of work. It really represents a huge amount of gameplay, a huge amount of perseverance. Constance Steinkuhler, who's a researcher at Madison, did some research on online polls in Lineage 2, which is a very large Korean-based game with several million players. And she found a poll about this question of gold farmers. That's what they're called, people who do this repetitive labor and sell the gold to richer players. And well, more than half of players disliked gold farmers, thought they were a problem because they were ruining the game, right? They're running around taking your resources and selling them for money. 31% of players have bought gold from them. So while they dislike the way that they are selling gold, they spam to sell gold, right? They hate them. They absolutely hate gold farmers. About a third of them have bought gold from the secondary market. So we can talk a little bit more about what that means in terms of labor, right? So I have one last clip to show. And this is a machinima that I got off of warcraftmovies.com. I'll set it up a little bit. Does anybody know what machinima is? Okay, I have a little thumbnail description. Can you give one?
Just short film cinemas created from cinemas and images from various games. And so a real famous one is Red versus Blue, which came from Halo.
That's a series, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of remediates television. Wow, they have a lot of episodes. I haven't been following Red versus Blue. That's impressive that they can maintain a storyline that long. Yeah, Halo is a popular engine to make films with. World of Warcraft is also a very popular one. Machinima has been around as long as there have been digital games. So, for example, the first machinima of, well, I'll say as long as there have been multiplayer role-playing games, there have been machinima, right? Because multiplayer role-playing games are played on your computer, and you can capture the output. Warcraft now has a module that comes with the game to record. So you can record what you're seeing as you're playing. Lots of times so you can share your great accomplishments with your friends. So show them, how do you kill this monster? Well, there's a secret. You have to run around the back and do this thing. And it's easier to look at it than to explain it. So they're trophy videos lots of times, or how-to demos, kinds of things. When World of Warcraft was released as a beta, the first people who tested it as beta players, meaning it wasn't available to the public, one of the first things they did was to capture the output and put it out on the internet. So there was actually machinima before World of Warcraft was released to the public. So people saw it being played by players who had recorded the output before they could ever have a chance to play it themselves, which is interesting, right? Not all games evolve that way. So machinima is a really kind of integral part of World of Warcraft's culture. There's thousands of machinima on Warcraft movies, but also on YouTube. If you enter World of Warcraft, you'll find so many. It will be crazy. They vary a lot in quality and in length. This is part of the kind of robust participatory culture, though, that you get in games, where people not only want to play games, they want to make modifications or mods to games. They want to make additional content to games, cartoons. There's a movie coming out from World of Warcraft. There are action figures that are coming out from World of Warcraft pretty soon. But mainly what this shows is the desire that fans have to participate and to add and extend the franchise, right? To give it more meanings and more characters and more stories than it already has. Blizzard controls World of Warcraft very tightly. There's an end-user license agreement as long as your arm, which nobody reads. And it has all kinds of things in there about how gold trading is illegal. Movies that criticize World of Warcraft in any way are illegal. Taking images from the game and using it for your own purposes or for money are illegal. All these things are basically not allowed. However, if you are banning 100,000 accounts and still having a huge gold farming problem, then obviously it's not really that enforceable. So I think online games are full of these gray areas of unenforceability that people agree to. Next time you have a spare 10 minutes, read an end-user license agreement. The stuff you're agreeing to is crazy. You often agree to give bulletin boards, for example, unlimited rights to publish or republish your work in any form till the end of time. So if you post in a forum, this is how you fix your Dodge Challenger or whatever, you don't own that information anymore, right? But of course, these are not enforced. Most people don't want that information, nonetheless. So this machinima is made using the World of Warcraft engine, using the capture function. It's a good example of pretty high-end user-generated content. What it does, as I've said before, often is to enlarge the media space or media world of games, right? Games are commercial property, and the ways that they can express this culture are tightly and legally controlled. Something like Star Trek, for example, however, has had fans who have consistently enlarged the world of Star Trek. For example, making Spock and Kirk gay and in love with each other, right? Slash fiction, that kind of thing. Fans are constantly altering content to narratives they love, mainly because these narratives often don't address race, gender, or class in very interesting ways. So if you're a queer person, a woman of color, if you're, from a different country and you don't see yourself in a media product that you love, the internet allows you to write yourself into it and then share it with other people. And lots of people are doing this. So this is a kind of positive aspect of how media industries are becoming more open, or having to become more open to user input. However, as I said before, the official position that Blizzard has is that farmers are bad and should be banned, that these machinima are their property still to some extent because they are their images. And this machinima will show, I'm hoping, how nation and labor and racialization are all kind of being knit together in process. So here we go. Okay, so probably some of you recognize this song, Akon, Smack That from last summer, a really, pretty popular song. The dance moves in here, by the way, are integral to the game. So different races of characters dance in different ways, and this is one of the ways these dance. So it's not exactly controlled by the players. The discourse in here about immigrants ruining the economy might sound somewhat familiar to some of you as we read the news and see this ferment right now in particular about immigration, what a controversial issue it is. And people tend to perceive it and tend to represent it not as about race, but as about resources and fairness. It's not the color of your skin, it's the economy in disarray. And so that is reinvoked in this game, where theoretically everybody is equal, right? But still the notion that before you came, things were different, things were more fair, is, I think, very powerfully articulated to the idea of race. As I said before, many players don't hate the Chinese per se. They just hate farmers. They hate people who sell their gold back to them, as they say. And IGE is a company that does the reselling. They buy the virtual property from Chinese sweatshops and then sell it back to US players for US dollars. So they are criticizing that third party here. They're not just saying it's the Chinese. But the critique is very much a racialized critique, I think. And the way in which it's done has lots to do with really kind of tired stereotypes about Asians. Eating dogs and cats. You know, the joke is, where'd all the doggies and kitty cats go? When they show a farmer shoveling gold into a vault, earlier you see the Chinese flag with the red background and the gold stars, with the farmers dancing in front of it saying 10 cents an hour is good money when you were Chinese. And so it really is invoking nation. There's no particular necessity to have the flag in there, but it's really talking about how buyers of gold, avatar level ups, and other virtual property are leisure players, and that Asian players are not leisure players. They're not playing the game right. They're not working it right. Instead, they are working. So this disenfranchisement of virtual workers, I think, really makes it necessary to talk about gameplay online in terms of labor more than it has been done. There are players who play, and there are players who work. And they are not the same in the game. As I said before, they're becoming racialized in very particular kinds of ways. And also, they're viewed in terms of immigration discourse. So they talk about this Chinaman gets fired. That's one farmer they'll have to replace, not supposed to be here in the first place. The they is presumably China. Right? It's viewed in these terms. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to talk about how WoW, World of Warcraft, and I would venture other online social games really aren't games for everyone in a kind of literal sense. Right? People have said, this game isn't for me. What they mean is that it's too hard, it's not enjoyable. I think what I mean is that WoW isn't a game for some players, it is a workplace. Worker players in these environments produce informationalized property that they cannot or are not permitted to consume themselves, nor sell directly to those who can. The big reward in World of Warcraft is getting your epic gear and your epic mount and, showing off. It's like having a nice car, living in a big house. Worker players produce this property, but do not get to use it. In this sense, their high-tech labor in low-tech conditions more closely resembles maquiladora factory laborers in Tijuana than it does recreational or software-based work. Farmers work in shifts, playing WoW in 12-hour sessions. I have other video that will show it's really not very nice. I mean, it's unpleasant. Their work exemplifies what Grace Hong calls flexible accumulation strategy of mixing non-modern and modern forms of production. On the one hand, WoW seems like a very modern activity. On the other hand, the non-modern form of sweated labor in China does not seem to go with that. What this does, however, is to produce racialized and gendered exploitation. So gold farming, I think, is an example of informationalized capitalism in which your avatar is a form of property that's composed of code yet produced by the sweat of an actual person's brow. If you've played World of Warcraft, you know level 70 character really is time out of someone's life. I mean, serious amounts of time out of someone's life, possibly carpal tunnel. as well. It's really intensely, manual in ways people don't really think about. I mean, these games are meant to do that, to kind of reward that twitchiness. Ed Castronova makes the point that much of the attraction of these games lies in the pleasure of accumulating what he calls avatarial capital. So again, economists love these games. They really adore them as great examples of economies in action, kind of abstract action. So do legal scholars. Critical and media scholars, we need to go there a little more, but they're interested in it for that reason. Like the notion of cultural capital or human capital to which it refers, avatarial capital is a soft form of accumulation. It's not industrial form of accumulation where you have hard accumulation, material objects. Instead, it's soft accumulation. As he puts it, quote, things like education and on-the-job experience that enhance earning power are intangible and inalienable, meaning no one can take it away from you. Some of you might have heard as children, get a good education. It's the one thing no one can take away from you, right? Yeah, you're going to say something? Oh. So what you're doing is creating human capital, right? Social capital. Unlike the physical capital, which is linked to gold in this game and to real-world economies, gold has a value. You can index the value of in-game gold to the dollar. Avatarial capital is a different but very compelling scale of value based on the accumulation of experience, points, and skills and attributes. If you play games, you know the more you level up, you get rewarded by being able to do more and to see more. Your avatar might be able to run faster, you might be able to go to a different level. You always get a reward, if only a graphical reward, getting to see something cool. You get a reward in terms of your abilities, kind of like education. This is precisely the kind of capital accumulation that Chinese worker players don't get. As soon as they level up, as soon as they acquire that goal, they have to sell it. So the repetition of value-producing labor in World of Warcraft also really curtails their movements in the game. Farmers are called farmers because they stay in one place and do the same thing over and over and over again. So they might kill the same monster over and over and over again for several hours. This drives people crazy because players who play for fun go to that area, they want to kill something, get some points, and they can't because the farmers are killing all of those things. In fact, the Timbermaw area in World of Warcraft is called Chinatown by other players. People who made Blizzard don't call it Chinatown, they call it Timbermaw. They call it Chinatown because there are so many Chinese players there, and they're not there because it's fun or because it's pretty or because it's interesting. They're there because there are a lot of monsters that you can kill without much risk to yourself. Okay, so legal scholars like Greg Lestowska have done a really good job, I think, describing some of the rules and constraints and regulation that govern the creation of physical capital in this economy. There's been almost no research on avatarial capital. Though, as Castronova notes and most gamers know, quote, coming to own the avatar psychologically is so natural among those who spend time in synthetic worlds that it is barely noticed. So you'll notice players talk about me, I got killed, or I just fell off a cliff. They know it's not them, but there's still a sense in which games provoke an emotional investment in avatars. And it's really very little studied. And when it is studied, it's studied from the perspective of the leisure player, not of the worker player. So when the leisure player's character is killed or loses or a duel or has something happen to them, there's certainly an emotional investment. But what about the worker players? What is that emotional investment when as soon as something becomes yours, you have to sell it? You're not allowed to keep it anymore. Feliciak does a psychoanalytically informed scholarship on avatars. And he says there is a relation between a player's real-life body and their avatar body. He writes, avatars are much more than a few bytes of data. They are cyborgs, a manifestation of the self beyond the realms of the physical, existing in a space where identity is self-defined rather than preordained. You do get to pick your avatar in World of Warcraft. There are hundreds of combinations. However, while Chinese gold farmers create and use avatars, they are unable to accumulate avatarial capital, since their job consists in selling level ups as well as golden equipment. So they're basically selling their characters. Thus, the notion that avatars are manifestations of the self for leisure players has to be applied to gold farmers, which will, I think, lead to a different kind of conclusion about the benefits of informationalized capitalism. The privilege of avatarial self-possession, owning yourself, like capital, is unevenly distributed across geopolitical borders. Anyone can play, but again, some people are playing, some people are working. Though emotional investment is an unavoidable side effect of avatar usage, the luxury of hard or soft capital accumulation is denied player workers. Stunkular estimates that gold farmers get $3 a day in US dollars for a 12-hour shift, but only if you hit your target of whatever amount of gold you're supposed to hit that day. So if you start playing, right, enjoying yourself, doing something fun, you will not get paid because you have, it's kind of a piecework model, you have a target you have to get every day. What's ironic is that these are some of the best players in the game. Right? They have a lot of experience in game. In fact, interviews with some of them describe how after their 12-hour shifts, they log out, they go to a gaming parlor down the street and log back on to play for fun because they get to keep those characters. Right? They're so invested in seeing what they're doing and enjoying the actual benefits of their gameplay that they'll go right back and spend another couple hours online. Well, exactly. That's the next thing we should talk about maybe is how do you organize this kind of labor? It's gray area labor, right? It's semi-illegal. But millions of actual dollars and euros are exchanged in this traffic. Like I said, 30% of all players of this one game have bought gold at one time. So if late capitalism is characterized by the requirement for subjects to be possessive individuals, that is to say, to make claims to citizenship based on property ownership, then player workers are unnatural subjects in that they are unable to come to own their avatar. The painful paradox of this dynamic lies in the ways that it mirrors the dispossession of information workers in the fourth world engendered by ongoing processes of globalization. Thank you.